Well, thank you everyone for being here. Today we're focusing on funding and evaluating. We have representation from several different roles within Farm to School, and thank you to our panelists for being here. At any time, if you want to pop something in the chat, please feel free to do so. Ask questions, just engage however. So let's do some quick introductions. So if everyone, and I'll just call on you one by one. My name's Janelle Smith, and I work for Virginia Cooperative Extension's Family Nutrition Program in the capacity of a SNAP-Ed agent, and I'm housed in Central Virginia. So if everyone will just share your name, your organization, and your role in Farm to School, and we'll just go in the order that you appear on my screen. Lisa, you want to start?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Lisa Homa. I work for the Virginia Tech Center for Public Health Practice and Research. And my main focus is on a project, a CDC project, high obesity program project based in Petersburg, Virginia, to prevent and reduce obesity through policy systems and environmental changes, mostly focused on built environment for safe and accessible physical activity, as well as increasing access to healthy foods. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks for being here. Amanda?
Hello, thank you for having me today too. I am Amanda Warren with Stanton City Schools. I am the director of school nutrition there, and I have a robust farm to school program that includes fresh, seasonal produce, but also a focus on proteins.
Thanks for being here. Fancy?
Greetings. My name is Fancy Terrell. I'm the local project director for Petersburg's Healthy Options Partnership, the grant that Lisa referenced earlier. My work is focused on bringing folks better access to healthy food options, as well as options for active transportation. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And Beth.
Hello, everyone. I'm Beth Morris, and I'm the director of school nutrition for Lynchburg City Schools. And as the director, I am also the procurement agent, and we have been very deliberate and intentional about including local foods in our national school lunch, school breakfast, after school snack and supper programs, as well as our summer food service program.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. All right, let's dive right in. So I've highlighted a few pictures from our friend Tyrone Cherry, who runs the Oasis Community Farm. And I love that he highlights unity. That's a really important part of, bringing all these groups together. So this is some pictures of his lovely farm. He provides produce to Petersburg City schools, and also lots of opportunities for youth education, hands-on on the farm. So we're going to dive right into funding. Our topics today are funding and evaluating. So when we think about funding, before even looking at your sources of funding, first take a step back and think about, what are your goals? What are the goals of the program? What are your objectives of your program? What do you need? What do you need to get started? What do you think you will need for the future? So, thinking short-term planning and long-term planning. And then what other funds and resources do you currently have available that maybe you're utilizing or you're underutilizing? So there are a lot of sources or potential sources for funding Farm to School. There is your basic allotment of school nutrition funds. There are some USDA kind of federal Farm to School grants, and those grant cycles are due in January. Then there are the Virginia Ag in the Classroom grants, and there's a lot of those in my area. The ones that I have seen have been smaller grants, but as you know, sometimes it's piecemealing a lot of different funding streams together, and those are typically due in October. Then there's the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth grants. Then VDACS, or Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, also provides grant opportunities, as well as local or regional foundations or collaborations. I know for us, for our district, Centra Foundation is a healthcare foundation that is really on everyone's radar in our area because they do share a lot of funding with a lot of different initiatives. As a SNAP-Ed agent, we also provide within the family nutrition program, we provide up to $2,500 for what we call mini grants. And so some things that we've done in our area with those is we've provided like community, funds to build a small community garden. There's lots of ways that we can partner with farm to school across the state. And then there are kids gardening grants. Okay, when you're thinking about funding and preparing to write grant applications, being prepared to provide what they're going to ask you. And these are kind of the things that they're going to ask you. Lisa, would you like to cover this slide?
Sure. I may delve into a little bit of one of your future asked questions. So something I learned along the way is creating these templates for what would be needed, like that we can use again and again, and you'll obviously have to amend and change and add to them, but having that and having that repository. So the things that I've seen with every single grant application I've written, whether for a national level or a very local or a state level, are these things. So kind of having an introduction to the project and or the program or both. Your problem statement and your need, the statistics and the story of what your project will address. And then, of course, what is this specific project that you're going to be doing? And I've also learned that I'm working with a team who is doing a ton of stuff, but it is wise to narrow down that scope for what you're funding and not talk about this piece, even though you're so excited about this piece. Talk about A, don't talk about B and C, but only in kind of that whole holistic story. And then, of course, and this is another place that I've found kind of a repository of measures that we kind of utilize has been helpful. I use a lot of them again and again, and may adapt them for if I'm being specific for like a 10% increase or whatever. But so what it is, how we will evaluate the project. And then, of course, kind of a general budget template. Sometimes that can't be a template, but making sure you know what range you're looking in and what you need, just like was on the last slide. And another thing that I consistently see is, after the funding is going, how are you going to leverage other funds, get new funds, or be sustainable with some other type of revenue?
Yeah, this is great information. And so reflecting back on like statistics in the story, this is where you can put in things like your community health needs assessment data, your census tract data. So all of that stuff is very pertinent. And it's nice to have, like Lisa mentioned, you have these little write-ups that you can pull up and then tweak as per your specific grant. This is great information. Thank you so much, Lisa.
So for continued funding, what we've done and found helpful is we've created a spreadsheet of funding opportunities. We have some tabs that are like, kind of the next 3 months and then recurring, and they're just kind of, we don't know if they're coming back up. And we've created basically categories of, what is the name? Where's the link? What is the funder? What is the range of funding? Is there a match needed? Your criteria for what you think they would need. Something I'm learning is that we might want to include that organization's mission. We'll probably get into this later, but you want to know that the potential funder is a good partner funding for you. And then, like I said, kind of just a follow up on the last one. You want to create a repository at a central location, maybe a OneDrive, a Google Drive, so your partners, and for sustainability, especially in the work we're doing with the CDC grant, so that the teams in Petersburg can continue to utilize some of these templates even when the grant ends. So creating that in a central location that everyone has access to, and hopefully you have a whole team working on these. That may not be the case. but, or people who may be interested in the future in using some of what you've started. So just basically what I said on the last slide, having all those things kind of ready to go for yourself and or others.
Also very wise to remind yourself when they come up for renewal, like Lisa mentioned. And I know that, you mentioned that working in teams, but I know our school nutrition directors, they're kind of a team of one that that have to wear so many hats in the course of their jobs. Okay, so now I would like to reach out to our panelists for some input. So I've got some questions here for reference, but you can approach these in order, or you can just share what your experience has been. So we're really interested in how you're currently funding your programs, what that looks like. Do you potentially see the ability to expand, and will that require additional funding? If so, have you thought about that, where that would come from? And then, at the end, really, what do you wish you knew regarding funding when you first started? So just sharing your experience, how you would like to share. Amanda, would you like to start?
I'd be happy to start. So I received funding through a multi-tiered sort of approach. I have sought grant funds. I like the ideas that you offered. I actually have not used any of those grant pipelines, so I'll be looking into those. I've used more national grant programs like Action for Healthy Kids. I've used the Chef Ann Foundation to do fresh produce in schools for tastings. I've also received grant funds through Let's Move Salad Bars to School. So that helped me have a vessel in which to, to use the fresh produce that I was bringing in. Sometimes, you sort of have to build it and then they will come type, approach to your program. And then I received large grant funds through the Mid-Atlantic Food Action Coalition. They provided us with $10,000 to purchase fresh local produce that we could distribute throughout the pandemic. And that was a really positive, contribution to our program and our community. And then I've also received grant funding in the new pilot procurement program through the Virginia Department of Education, which I believe Beth is also a part of, and she can maybe speak to that when she speaks. But that's allowed me to, again, insert more fresh foods, more fresh produce, but also have a focus on some protein items in our schools that are from local farms and local producers. And I think the process for me, it's interesting that you brought up sort of that template, because in the beginning of doing this work, I sort of started just writing my story. Like, what was my agenda? What was my goal? And I kept building on that and just adding to it. The more I learned about the program that I was actually running, the more I could, insert that information to and that data. And then when it came to writing a grant, a larger grant, national grant, which was Let's Get Schools Scratch Cooking through the Chef Ann Foundation, I realized that I had a lot of the data that this grant was requiring. So then I once I got that grant in place, I copied and pasted all of that information into another template and have been able to really successfully use that and replicate that in additional grant work, whether it's, a larger or a smaller grant. I do plan to always seek additional funding. It just makes sense for the program. I have it on my radar always to try for the USDA Farm to School grant, but every time the cycle comes around, I'm always, so far behind in something else, but it is on my radar and I do want to do that. And I also sometimes, receive just donations into the program from local communities that I will use to support buying fresh local foods. And we've had local teaching farms actually donate their produce to us at different times. So there's again a multifaceted way of sort of like funding these programs and these purchases. I think if there was anything I wish I knew regarding funding was, that once I started, the grant process and started receiving the funding to support the program, like you want to do so much, and then you realize like, oh, there's these resources out there, but you also kind of have to not oversaturate yourself so that you can get the work done and get it done well. So I would just say, it was great to figure out I could find these funding sources, but also, just to do what makes sense and do what you're capable of in the time and the frame that you're capable of doing it in.
That's a great point, because obviously you're all here because you're enthusiastic and you're an advocate of these programs. So this type personality tends to definitely let things overtake them. Beth, would you like to share next?
Well, I think I'm probably the lone ranger in this group in that I have not sought grant funds. I have solely used the revenues that come in through the operating of the National Child Nutrition Programs, for which Lynchburg City Schools participates in all three: National School Lunch, School Breakfast, CACFP, and SFSP. And the income, the revenue that is generated from that is really how any K-12 public school system operates. And I've said this before, I may have said it in our previous webinar. Amanda and I must operate as if we were small businesses. And so, as well as being, as you said, many different roles, I'm also the chief financial officer as it comes to managing, the funds that we have available to us, and looking at food costs, plate costs. And what we've been able to do in Lynchburg is to incorporate local foods. We have a source of lettuce that we use weekly. It's in our menus every day at our schools, and our distributor identifies products, produce that is local, that we'll bring in, as well as I guess if you want to call it a grant. I don't believe, but we received funding through the Virginia Department of Education to be part of a pilot utilizing produce through the food hub 4P. And that, for a school division that has a rather large budget for food, it was a small amount, but it did allow us to do some taste testings for elementary school children. I really believe if we're going to move this program into really being sustainable and more the norm in any one of our programs, we're going to have to start with our youngest children. And so when there are opportunities to have exposure, intentional exposure through a taste test, I tended to concentrate on the youngest and hope to build their capacity for wanting to and enjoying fresh fruits, vegetables, and, as Amanda said, proteins. The amount of money that we receive to operate our programs is a finite amount for each meal that we serve, and I'm very committed to, I guess, pushing the envelope when it comes to meal cost, because that really is, what our service is to our kids. So the quality of the meals, and when we talk about mission and my intention and why do this. It's for the kids. It's for our children. It's to help them to develop those habits, develop those norms in their lifestyles that will allow them to be as healthy, and the activity part is there. So I think that any K-12 operation could very easily incorporate local purchasing local, just through your relationships with your distributor, and, as well as identifying those local sources, those local farmers, and I found it not to be cost prohibitive. you look at, if you're, as Amanda said, if you're going to spend $5 in something on a product that purchasing it commercially may be a few dollars less. Well, you balance that in the menus that you're designing, so that a menu that may cost a slightly higher than what your average per plate cost is being absorbed by over the course of the menus that you're designing.
Wonderful, thank you. Quick question. When you talked about the pilot study, was that something that you sought out actively, or were you
Actually, no. Actually, VDOE identified school districts that had that would have access to the distribution line stream of 4P, and so Lynchburg and Stanton were two of, I can't remember how many handful of districts that were chosen because we were distance wise and just in their on their distribution route.
Thanks so much.
But since that, I mean, I will say that was a pilot, but we have continued and drawn up a contract with and created 4P as now a new vendor for Lynchburg City Schools. We have exhausted our funds through that pilot. We actually exhausted them in April, but want to continue receiving and those items that they do have available. So they will now be another distributor for us.
That's great news. So you're already expanding your sourcing. That's great. Thanks so much, Beth. Fancy, would you share your funding experience with us, please?
Sure. So I have to credit Lisa for making our funding experience very streamlined. I'm very, very grateful for her guidance. In addition, the grant coordinator that ran the farm school operations before me had a really great system. I will say that me being a person, I consider myself a backwards learner. So I very much had to figure out a system that works for me to kind of catch up to where she is. But those things have been very helpful. Right now, the bulk of the farm to school programming funds come from the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth. However, because of us, one thing that I'm extremely proud of just in general throughout the organization is we really find every opportunity to partner. So there are lots of exchanges that happen between our umbrella organization, PHOPS, the HOP grant from the CDC, in conjunction with our work with the foundation. We also have started to expand and look at funding sources outside of that. For example, for some of the work that didn't quite fit into the parameters of what we wanted to do with the funds from the foundation, we've been able to write funding so that it still fits into the overall picture, but it's not pulling from such a small pot of funds over and over again. So identifying other funding sources that can fit into our programs has been really helpful. I also, again, going back to speak about partnership, I feel like that's been a really critical point in the work, because sometimes there are things that I'd like to do that maybe I don't have the funding for right away, or I don't have the capacity to take on. But by having these very strategic partnerships, we're able to figure out what organization is doing something similar to it, what support can we lend towards it, what support may they be able to lend to us. And I'm figuring out ways that we can kind of not reinvent the wheel, but strengthen each other's organizations while we're accomplishing the mission. So I can give you an example. The nonprofit Podium in Richmond, they specialize in literacy. And knowing that we have this intersection of needing health literacy in the city of Petersburg and also needing support for just writing literacy to go towards SOL standards and things like that, it made sense to have a writing program that was specifically about nutrition literacy. However, with our farm to school associates already being spread so thin, it made perfect sense for our program and Podium to figure out a way that we could marry our programs together and support one another. This way, it's not an additional lift on us, but it's a platform that we already have that's existing and a curriculum and people that they already have. So it made sense for us to bring those things together. So I feel like the more that we're able to dive into our communities and figure out what other folks are already accomplishing that's effective and how we can support that, it really does take a lot of pressure off of funding sources sometimes, or how much capacity you have within your own limited group. As far as what I knew when I started the program, I think that my situation, I'm sure it's not unique. However, it felt unique and it still feels unique sometimes. Because again, I was walking into a program that someone else designed. So a lot of those ideas were great ideas, but maybe it wasn't the way that I would prefer to do them, or vice versa. So I think that I probably would, number one, I probably would have very direct conversations in the beginning about what expectations were, as far as what are some of the things that you really want to see carried out and what can I play around with. I also think that for me, one of the challenges has been the grant that I operate under now is a reimbursable grant. So that means that the flow of money can be odd sometimes. The person that was in the role before mine, their personal finances had a lot more flexibility where they were able to, borrow money out and be reimbursed for things. And I don't have that particular, that's not my living situation right now. So just trying to figure out ways to work around that. I think that that's something that I would have given a little bit more consideration to. I'm sorry, my cat is doing a lot right now. But I think that that's something that I would have given a little bit more consideration to, not walked away from, but definitely something that I would have wanted to figure out, okay, what are some alternative plans before we get into this? But the good news is that I have another opportunity with another grant cycle, and and we'll do it that way.
Lisa, is there anything you'd like to share with regards to funding?
Just maybe a few additional sources that I could think of. I apologize if some of what I said wasn't that applicable, especially to our school nutrition director friends. And we all have these different experiences. But what I was saying, I was thinking for especially nonprofit organizations, we found a lot of success with local health foundations, so local foundations and local civic organizations. So smaller amounts, but they've also given us some more latitude on what can be funded. So that has been helpful. And like I said in the previous slides, kind of having this process, I feel like this might be more applicable to be as efficient. So it's a lot of work, but having this spreadsheet, having the criteria for, and it kind of filling out what you need so you know if the grant is even applicable. And then like Fancy said, first step, once you know it might fit, is talk to whoever your partners are about how they can participate, how you could leverage something they have, how you can leverage something they have for the grant, how you might not need to, but so that you are efficient with your time, because I realize that is something that is similar amongst all of us and very valuable, I'm sure, to our school nutrition directors. So hopefully that is a little bit more helpful than maybe some of my previous stuff.
Oh, I think it's all helpful. I think, how many times have you been in a meeting or you overheard a conversation or been in a conversation and it strikes something that may not be exactly what was said, but something's, spurred you to think about something in a different context or a potential collaborative partner. Like, I think there's no such thing as, as too much information.
Can I add one more thing I
Please.
neglected to mention? I think another thing that has been extremely helpful for me, and I see it be helpful for people in other organizations, and if you are a team of one, it could possibly be a good help to you also, is that within the PHOPS organization, we've kind of pulled together a working group specifically for grants and finances. What I see happening in that group is that everybody brings a small nugget to add to the bigger pot. So that means that there are different people that are identifying grant opportunities. There are different people that you may be able to collaborate with in the actual writing of the grant. There are other eyes looking at timelines to make sure that nothing is past an expiration or you've missed an application date. When you're working as a team of one, I really suggest finding partnerships in areas like that may be helpful, because there are other people that are working in teams of one. And even if they may not be as geographically close to you, through Zoom, you may be able to find a time once a month or once every other month where you can come together and just compare notes. I found this opportunity. Is this helpful for you? Share and compare notes, just so that you are keeping it active in your mind. There are so many deliverables that are necessary. And I think that's another thing. The amount of deliverables that can vary based on what grant opportunities you're looking for. So having other people to compare those things with and think through what evaluation processes may look like can be very helpful in the process long term.
Thank you, Fancy. Thank you very much for that. Quick question to our school nutrition directors. Is there a directory or a collection of school nutrition directors that are participating in Farm to School that you're aware of?
So I guess I'll speak to that, Beth. There's not, to my knowledge, there's not a designated group, but there are like-minded individuals that are often, like where we met, at certain conferences or certain places where we kind of we meet one another and we discuss, our current, situation, our agendas, our goals, ambitions, but there's not a selected group. Correct, Beth?
That's correct. There is not a list, but as Amanda said, it will, at our state conferences, farm to school conferences, and even having a specific breakout session on farm to school, all those individuals that are in the room, those become you make your own list,
right?
and reach out to those, and it's something that would be helpful. I think we've also pushed for also having a concise list of those distribution streams and farmers who are interested in partnering or becoming a part of the farm to school movement. From the last meeting that we had, I had a wonderful conversation with one of the farmers, and now a distributor is interested in purchasing from him, and then availing those items through my commercial distributor. So I think we have a ways to go in putting those pieces together. They're out there. But opportunities such as this and others that are specific now to addressing farm to school and bringing those people into the same room. I really do think that is how this movement for our youth is going to become much more the norm than identifying a specific week in the month that we celebrate. We should be celebrating local on every plate that we serve to our children, and it's exciting to be a part of. But there are some times when you do feel like you're out there just trying to find that needle in the haystack, and we haven't yet, I think, as a collaborative group, whether it's the state agencies, whether it's nonprofits, whether it's the farmers, the schools, created an efficient network that would allow this to be much. Those that are committed are doing the work. I think we'd have more if the work wasn't so hard.
I think you struck a chord there. I think network is the key, right? To have this established network where people can share experience. Thank you, everybody, for all of your wisdom in talking about funding. Let's move on to evaluation. So evaluation is essential for a lot of things. You know, when we talk about, especially applying for grants or applying for, funding, a lot of people want to know, not only what you're going to do, but how did it go, right? So when we think about why we want to evaluate is to tell that story from start to finish. Even if things don't end up the way that you planned, sometimes it's much better. But also to assess what's going well, what needs changing, to support future as well as current, funding streams. And, we talked about collaborations and partners, Fancy spent a lot of time talking about that. So this is when you evaluate, you're able to share that data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, with partners and potential partners and families in your communities. So, evaluation, it's good to know where you stand, how it's going, to determine the effectiveness of the program. Especially when you're selecting what to have, gathering data on what the children prefer to eat, what do they like? Obviously, we want them to try things that they think they don't like, because oftentimes they do like them. It's just a lack of exposure, as well as, again, planning for the future. So evaluation is very important in the farm to school world. And so broadly thinking about the two different types of evaluation. So one is the quantitative, which is more like the numerical data, the stuff, how many pounds did you serve? How many dollars did you spend locally? If you did a survey about how children receive the local broccoli, that is an evaluation. Did you have to spend extra hours training staff to do scratch cooking? Keeping track of those hours and how that, who you partnered with, how it went. Were you able to increase your scratch cooking as a result of those training hours, as well as like number of participants? That's important. And thinking more about telling the story is more qualitative. So thinking about, did this, the inclusion of having salads in Lynchburg City schools, did it change the eating patterns of the children? Were more children less hesitant to try salads, and then as a result try other things? Did they learn more about healthy food knowledge? Did they learn more about opportunities and different offerings, as well as did you learn more about the barriers, like what's keeping you from going to the next level? So all of these things, thinking about evaluation, is more than just checking a box. All right, now I want to turn it back to our panelists, thinking about, are you currently evaluating? How do you collect that? Does your funder or funders require evaluation? If so, what do they require? Do you have a plan to change or increase what you're currently doing? And then again, what do you wish you knew before, with regards to evaluation specifically? So just feel free to share. You can use these as a guide, or share what you would like to share. And Amanda, will you start us off?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and keep the order. So I do evaluate and have evaluated from the beginning of doing this. I'm in my 8th year now as a school nutrition director. I'll go ahead and jump to the bottom question, because it sort of will drive the rest of my answers. Is, what did I wish I knew in regards to evaluation? And that was, I wish that I, from the beginning, had been more data driven, and not been prescribing everything to the qualitative, sort of like, I'm observing, I'm seeing some changes. So in year 2 was when, and I'm sure Beth can speak to this, but in school nutrition programs, oftentimes there's competing agendas. There's a focus on curriculum versus a focus on school nutrition and food and things like that. So you may get pushback sometimes when you're trying to implement some of these programs. Someone might feel that it may create too much extra, pressure or work for someone else. So I think that being able to provide qualitative and quantitative data that says, no, this work makes a difference, and this work makes a difference to to the education piece, because we're enhancing the education environment by doing these programs. So what I realized in year 2 was that I was seeing a difference, but I couldn't go backwards and go, what, it's because I did this, 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 and this. So I wanted to start taking more quantitative data. So I started, number 1, with adding a budget code where I could track every single local purchase that I made, just so I could just have that data. I also started doing taste testings where we took a count. We took a physical, count, either with popsicle sticks or what was another one we used? We often use popsicle sticks. And there was another voting tag that we used, but I can't remember what it was now. But we just would take those and physically count them. So we could see the number of kids that we reached, and we could see whether or not the students responded well to whatever, tasting that we were doing. Another thing that I did was utilized a student nursing team who was in their final phases of their program and needed to do some in-service work. And I wanted to evaluate if exposing children to new vegetables would actually change their eating behavior. So what we did was we used that student team to do interventions with the kindergarten classes, where they introduced red and green pepper varieties in the raw. And then we did a more complex recipe, and then another more complex recipe, still including the peppers in the raw each time. We counted children in the service line. Everybody was instructed not to do any sort of intervention, not to point out the peppers, not to, do anything to influence the child's choosing behavior. So we counted how many kindergartners chose green and red peppers prior to the intervention. And then when the intervention was over, we went back and did the same count. And what we did find, while it may not have been statistically, huge, but 9 more kindergartners chose peppers after the intervention. So it was a neat way to kind of put a quantitative approach to whether or not, food exposure does change choosing behavior. And we feel like that was a good measure that supported that it does. So those are some things about how I do the quantitative. I also oftentimes speak publicly and am asked to speak on certain aspects of my program. So I feel like when I put together the presentations, it's often a way also where I can collect this information. I can collect the story, I'm adding data that I need, and then it's sort of a one-stop shop. So if someone says, hey, what about your plastic solution? I go back to that presentation and go, oh yeah, this is everything that we did. And this was how we measured it. And so those are also, I think, really good tools. If you don't want to keep replicating stuff, you just put it in one spot, and a presentation is always a great way to, I think, present your story and your data. The plans to increase or change my evaluation tools. I mean, I think it's always good to have data or stories that reinforce your work. So if there's a new way that I feel like I can further, reinforce the work that we're doing by collecting some extra data, I'm going to do it, or use a new evaluation tool. I will definitely do that. I also, like a fancy, to echo her words, use my partners to help collect data. So I work closely with Project Grows, which is much like the community farm that was presented earlier. And they provide, produce and tastings in our schools. They provide help with that. And they also measure that student access reach. So they can tell me, yes, when we did this function with you, we reached 480 kids. And so that's another resource for helping you get those statistical numbers. And I think, yeah, that's about it for that evaluation piece. But I do think that combination of the story plus the data to reinforce the story is really key.
Yeah, great point. And thank you for sharing. I love that you had a partnership with nursing students, talking about partnerships. That's great. And I think speaking in public where, whether it's in front of a group or whether you're at a cocktail party, sharing what's going on, you never know if that person might be interested or have, funds available to contribute, or a partnership. Yeah,
it's true.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Beth, can you share your evaluation?
our evaluation system is somewhat like Amanda's in that all our programs are very strictly regulated. We have to document the production of our meals. And so on those production records, we will, it will be specified that the ingredients that were used, if it was red peppers that were being served that day, that red pepper is going to be on that production record. And you're going to see how much was produced, and also how much was actually chosen by the students during that particular meal. We look at that. I do want to say, purchasing local may not necessarily be recognized by the student, at least in our case. We have been ever since I have come to Lynchburg to work in this capacity. We have not seen iceberg lettuce in our schools. We went completely to romaine and spring mixes and spinach. And where I've been able to purchase that locally, those items are local items. But I also will say that there are times, because of the availability and the quantity that is available to us. I mean, we're a large consumer, and even the relationship we have right now with the farmer in an adjacent county, he's not able to produce all of the romaine that we need, and so I don't know that our students necessarily know that they're getting romaine from the farmer in Amherst, or they're getting romaine from that was grown in another not local area, or an apple that's coming from Nelson County, another adjacent large grower of apples, or whether it's a Washington apple. We do our best, and we do it whenever we are offering local. We advertise that on the line. We'll have a signage that says it's local. Whether the kids read that, identify that, make that connection, but we are in our program, we're replacing an item. Broccoli. Yes, we have broccoli. It's very popular with kids. One of the vegetables that we can get them to eat. That's a commercial product. We can get it frozen. We can get it fresh. But when we can get it, the availability for it is local. We're going to replace that commercial item, that non-local item, with a local item. So does the student necessarily recognize that they're getting the local versus, and for us, that's inconsequential to me. I know that the farm to school program, the nutrients that the students are that are in an item that has not had to been stored and shipped for periods of time, is greater. We know the benefit, but I don't necessarily focus my attention on making the students aware of that. So when I'm evaluating our program, I'm looking to see, are they eating? Are they eating the items that we are preparing for them? And also being deliberate in the fact that we know historically that this number of apples is going to be consumed at this lunch period. And so we're not over ordering. But another thing that we have done with local produce is apples, cutting the apples, cutting the cucumbers, making them so that the kids can actually consume them in that short period of time that they have during the meal. That was an evaluation period. Serving it whole, how much was wasted, how much was put back on the table, versus the presentation and how the item was served. That was that really changed our production and our preparation of the items that we were serving. So and also I have my staff go into the cafeterias, and there's that qualitative. noticing the kids that are eating an entree salad that has the romaine in it, has the local grape or cherry tomatoes in it. How are you enjoying your salad today? Wow, it's really good. Well, just want you to know that Farmer John up the street, helped prepare, help make that, salad, for you today. So that, I think those conversations with the kids has more impact than the signage, that we use, to let them know that we're providing them local.
Great, thank you. We have about 7 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we, if you have questions, if you want to pop them in the chat, I want to give, make sure we have time for questions. And Fancy, I want to give you time to talk about your evaluation as well. Thank you.
Yeah. I really appreciated Beth and Amanda's comments. Beth, I really love the way that you're thinking about how things are broken down and being served. So I'm definitely taking notes on my side of that. I think that the answer for me has been partnerships. Lisa has done an incredible job of creating documents that are easy for my team to put their information in after each event. So that way it's housed and stored. I'm trying not to repeat anything that was already said. I also think that there is a huge benefit of, if you are able to work in partnerships, having a good idea of what each partner needs as far as evaluation ahead of time. I think that is a great thing to do, because again, you may not have to reinvent the wheel. You may need the same deliverables. And if you do need separate deliverables, there still may be information that can be exchanged. I also highly recommend setting evaluation markers throughout the cycle throughout the year. So if it's not all done right at the end, and I heard a lot of this repeated in what Beth mentioned as well, but if you have some clear markers, or at least opportunities for you to get formal and informal evaluations throughout the cycle, I think that helps not only improve things in real time and streamlines operations in real time, but it also makes it a lot easier for you to have an idea of what your evaluative data will look like at the end of the process, which makes things a lot smoother at the end. So don't want to repeat any of the information that was given out earlier, but those are the things that stand out the most to me.
Thanks so much, Fancy. Do you have any last minute evaluation things, Lisa, you would like to share with us?
Sure. Again, I don't want to repeat what everyone else said. They are all, really resonated with me and are true of a lot of the work we do. I will say, like, from the academics perspective, almost every evaluation framework I've ever seen starts with partnerships and talking to people. So that's what I had on my list, to talk to your community, your constituents, the leaders, the people you have to report to, the funders, to figure out what it is you want to know. The other kind of what I wish I knew is what Fancy said. We're still refining our processes to make them more efficient and more feasible. So continue to talk that out, but do the work ahead of time to kind of make that system. I think we've got a system, but we're 4 years out of 5 years in. So doing all that kind of, I believe we would have been more efficient all along had we done a little bit more of conversing on how that was going to go, the data collection pieces, and continuing and like Amanda said, keeping kind of a repository, same thing here, keeping all that documentation will allow you to, how you did this and what you did will allow you to continue to utilize your limited time in the best way. And then the last thing I was going to say is, I'm kind of the reverse of Amanda. I'm a little bit more of a quantitative person. So I was always like, well, here's the numbers. You don't need the story. Like, there it is. There's the need. There's what we did. It's all, you figure it out. But I have learned over the past 4 years how important that story is. So just to kind of reiterate how important that storytelling piece, having those numbers in your story, but having the voices who you are serving, it is just resonates with so many people. So I guess I can say that. And pictures. I've learned that was new to me, that pictures are part of evaluation. So I think that's my ending comment. Thanks.
Yeah, great inclusion of that. Pictures are very important because sometimes pictures can tell the whole story, or at least part of it. And I think it's interesting because we all have strengths, right? And so partnering with, Lisa likes data. So partnering with someone who likes to tell a story. So really being mindful of who your partners are. Well, we've got about a minute for questions. Are there any questions for our panelists? Again, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone for being here today.
Lisa, would you be willing to share the evaluation tool that you spoke about that you and Fancy used together?
Sure. It's more like process measures for us. So it's our process measures, but sure, it's a Google form and it's very specific, but yeah, I
would just like to see that framework.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And then you can certainly tweak it to fit your needs.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask one other question if there's no others? One of the very few other projects I work on happens to be, don't hate me, Beth and Amanda, but the farm to school procurement, the local food procurement with DOE, Virginia DOE. And I'm just wondering, if there was a question about being interested in a network like you talked about, kind of in the middle of this session, would any additional questions be a burden, or does that sound like kind of a helpful format to start gathering that interest, or is there something else in mind? I just know we worked with Virginia Department of Education to design the tool for the last 2 years and then redesign the tool. And so that front page has just limited questions that are more qualitative in nature about school gardens, et cetera. If there was something about interest on there, would that be a decent way in your minds to collect kind of that interest in a network for farm to school like-minded people?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't want to speak for Beth or for anyone else, but for me personally, I feel like that would it would be a good way to collect interest, but also I would be interested in something like that. Even though we have a lot on our plates, I think that anytime we can sort of fine tune, the work that we do, we could and should.
I agree that identifying those individuals that that want to potentially learn more and how to become a part of. And I think that the initiative that Janelle's been a part of is starting to do that. I would just like to see that expand and more opportunities, because a one-time, particularly for our farmers, they may that one scheduled date may not be the date that, or maybe the date that they have to be out picking their harvest or whatever. But that's whatever avenues that we could identify that would help us to connect, like a dating game. I'd love for that to be a resource for all of us on both sides.
Speed dating for farm to school. I like it, Beth.
Yeah,
I
know,
like
that's
it a
great.
lot. Yeah. Well, we've come to the end of our webinar, and thank you again, everyone, for being here, and look forward to continuing our partnerships. Hope you all have a great day.